There's a kind of silence that doesn't just echo around you, it echoes inside you. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's that subtle shift you feel when someone starts pulling away, when their texts get shorter, when your calls go to voicemail, when the way they once leaned in has turned into them looking past you. They're still technically there, but emotionally, spiritually, they've already started walking. And if you're honest with yourself, you felt it long before you admitted it. Maybe you started checking your phone a little more often, wondering what changed, replaying conversations, overthinking every word, trying to spot where you messed up. Because when people distance themselves, our first instinct is to chase. We want answers. We want closure. We want to pull them back before they disappear completely. But that instinct is the trap. Let me be real with you. The most dangerous thing you can do when someone starts fading away from your life is try to convince them to stay. Because what are you really doing when you chase? You're handing over the power. You're reinforcing the belief that their attention defines your worth. You're placing your identity in someone else's shifting hands. And they can feel it. People can feel when you're chasing. Even if you smile, even if you're casual, even if you say, "I'm fine, really," there's an energy in you that's reaching, and they feel it. And the more they feel that energy, the more they pull away. Not because you're not good enough, but because in that moment, you've forgotten that you are. Listen, this is something a lot of people don't talk about. That desperation energy, it doesn't come from love. It comes from fear. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of not being chosen. Fear that maybe, just maybe, this person was your last shot at connection. And I get it. When someone you care about starts detaching, it hits a very raw part of you. That part of you that still remembers being ignored, being forgotten, being told, directly or indirectly, that you're not enough. So you try to fix it. You explain yourself. You apologize for things you didn't even do. You adjust your tone, your personality, your needs, just to keep them around. But the truth, anyone who stays because you shrunk yourself isn't really with you. They're with the version of you that's wearing a mask. And eventually that mask becomes unbearable. So here's the first real step. Stop chasing, not out of pride, not out of ego, but out of respect. Respect for your energy, respect for your peace, respect for your own worth, whether they see it or not. Now let's break this down practically. What does chasing actually look like? It's not just blowing up their phone. Sometimes it's way more subtle. It's over-apologizing when you did nothing wrong. It's posting something online just to get their attention. It's dropping hints that you're hurt, hoping they'll care. It's pretending you're okay just so they don't feel guilty. These are all ways we reach. We try to maintain the connection, even if we have to betray ourselves to do it. But here's the deal. Any connection that costs your self-respect is too expensive. If someone starts to drift, your job isn't to prove your value. Your job is to remember it. Because here's what most people forget. You are here the prize. You are not the background character in someone else's story. You're not the afterthought, the convenience, the emotional bandage. You're not something to be picked up and put down when it suits them. You are a whole, complete person. And if someone can't recognize that, if they're too distracted, too indecisive, too distant to see you, then maybe their absence is a gift in disguise. But I get it. The silence is hard. You want to fill it. You want to say something. You want to know what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they want. But let me tell you this, the moment they go quiet is the moment you go still. Not reactive, not emotional, not impulsive. Still enough to listen to yourself, still enough to reclaim your center, still enough to remember your peace is not up for negotiation. Let's talk about the story that plays in your head, because when someone pulls away, the mind creates all kinds of narratives. They're probably busy. Maybe I said the wrong thing. They just need space, right? If I give them time, they'll come back. Maybe, maybe not. But the real question is, are you okay either way? Because if your well-being depends on their return, you're not in love, you're in need. And that's not power, that's dependency. Here's what I want you to know. If someone starts to ignore you, drift from you, distance themselves without explanation or respect, you don't owe them your energy. You don't owe them closure. You don't owe them a version of you that bends just to be tolerated. What you owe is to yourself, to your time, to your healing, to your dignity. So if they fade, let them. You don't have to match their silence with passive aggression. You don't have to play games. Just go quiet and go inward, because in that stillness, you'll find a strength they never expected, a strength they might have taken for weakness. But it's not. It's the beginning of something different. And here's the most powerful part. When you stop chasing, you give yourself space to grow. Not for them, but for you. You start remembering who you are outside of being chosen. You start connecting with the version of you that doesn't beg to be seen, but simply is. And from that place, everything changes. Now that you've stopped chasing, what comes next? That's where most people get lost. They confuse silence with waiting. They think walking away means standing still. But this isn't about being passive. This isn't about sulking in your room, waiting for their attention to magically return. This is about rebuilding. Because when someone walks out of your space or quietly fades, they leave behind more than just distance. They leave behind a vacancy. And what you do with that space, that determines everything. Let me tell you what happens when you stop chasing and start focusing inward. You stop being reactionary. You start becoming untouchable. Not in a cold, egotistical way, but in a calm, centered, grounded kind of way. The kind of untouchable that comes from self-possession, from presence, from learning to sit in your own skin without flinching. Because here's the truth most people miss. People aren't drawn to desperation. They're drawn to direction, to people who know who they are, to people who don't flinch when others pull away, to people who respect themselves enough to walk and never look back. This is the season of silent work. It's the part they never see. The part where you stop broadcasting your healing and just live it. You start waking up earlier, not to prove anything, but to build discipline. You journal, you reflect, you sit with your discomfort instead of avoiding it. You eat better, move your body, stretch your mind, not for Instagram, not for your ex to scroll and accidentally see, but for you, because you're not building a comeback. You're building a foundation that doesn't shake the next time someone exits. You stop updating the world about your pain. You start living your peace privately. You begin to understand what real healing looks like. It's not loud. It's not vengeful. It doesn't require a big speech or a viral quote. It's in the way your eyes stop scanning every room for someone. It's in the way you walk slower, breathe deeper. It's in the way you stop explaining yourself. You become mysterious, not because you're trying to be, but because the old version of you who overshared, over-apologized, over-explained, that version is gone. And when that version disappears, people start to notice. They might not say anything, but they feel it. Let's talk about mystery for a second, because in a world addicted to visibility, mystery is magnetic, not because you're hiding, but because you've become selective. You've stopped posting every thought, stopped reacting to every trigger, stopped giving access to people who never earned it. You don't play games, you just protect your peace. And that energy, that's powerful. Because when people can't read you, they can't control you. But this isn't about being fake, it's about being rooted. Rooted in your values, rooted in your sense of self, rooted in a rhythm that's not controlled by the opinions of others. You don't announce that you've changed, you let your silence say it for you. And the deeper you go into that inner work, the more you realize something wild. You're not even angry anymore, not at them, not at how they left, not at how they ignored you, because now you can finally see it. They didn't abandon you, they revealed themselves. And your silence, that was the moment you chose truth over attachment. There's a quote I love: "Your peace is more important than proving a point." And that's what you're learning to embody. You don't need to correct the record. You don't need to be understood. You don't need to circle back for closure. You just need to keep becoming. So let's talk about how to armor your emotions without closing your heart. Because being untouchable isn't about building walls, it's about building filters. It's not about shutting down. It's about choosing what gets in. You become unshakable, not because nothing moves you, but because you've learned to master your response. You feel everything, but you don't feed everything. You observe, you buzz, you breathe. And from that space, you choose your next move with clarity, not chaos. Now, let me ask you this. When was the last time you just sat in silence? No music, no scrolling, no distractions, just you, with you. It's uncomfortable at first, but eventually you get used to it. You stop fearing the quiet, because in that quiet you begin to hear something else. Your own voice, not the voice of rejection, not the voice of someone pulling away, but the voice you buried under the noise of needing to be chosen. And that voice, that's your compass. This is where the shift happens. You stop seeking validation. You start cultivating vibration. You stop asking, will they come back? And start asking, what kind of energy am I putting into the world? Because when your energy changes, your life changes. Not overnight, but inevitably, you attract differently, you repel differently, you operate on a frequency most people can't even interpret. And the ones who can, they don't question your silence, they respect it. This is what it means to become untouchable, not because you're flawless, but because you're focused, not because you're perfect, but because you're present. And the people who walked away, they might circle back. They might not. Either way, it won't matter, because you'll be too busy becoming the kind of person who no longer waits for anyone to recognize them. So if you're in the middle of the silence, if you're doing the work and no one sees it, if you're healing in private while the world moves on, just know that's where legends are born. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. Not in applause, but in alignment. Keep going, you're not behind, you're just becoming. and soon they'll feel it, even if they never understand it. Here's what happens when you've done the work. You're no longer haunted by the silence. You no longer check their page. You no longer wonder what they think or if they'll ever come back. You've entered a different phase now, one where you've stopped waiting, stopped hoping, stopped shrinking. You've become a version of yourself that feels complete, not because they returned, but because you did. And now they notice. Maybe not all at once, maybe not with words, but they feel it. They sense your absence differently now. Not like a moment, but like a missing presence, a shift in energy, a loss of access. And maybe they try to reach out. A like, a message, a passive comment disguised as concern. But here's the thing, you're not that version of you anymore. You're not waiting by the phone. You're not desperate for a sign. You're not hungry for attention from someone who didn't see your value the first time. You've tasted self-respect, and you're not going back. Because once you've built peace within yourself, chaos just isn't attractive anymore. You see through it. You recognize it for what it is, a loop, not a lesson, and you choose not to re-enter. That's the real flex. That's the quiet power. See, most people assume power means control, but real power is clarity. It's walking into familiar rooms and realizing you've outgrown them. It's hearing their voice again and feeling nothing, not hate, not anger, just freedom. And you don't need to announce it. There's no dramatic "I'm over you" post, no call to say, "Look who I am now." Why? Because when you're truly over it, you don't need them to know. You just keep walking. Let's pause here, because this is where you might feel a strange mix of emotions. Part of you feels proud, strong, stable, rooted. But another part, it grieves. It grieves the version of you who once begged, who once thought silence was rejection, who once gave and gave just to be seen. So take a moment for that version, honor them. They didn't know better. They were surviving the only way they knew how. But now, you know better, and you live better. This is where you reclaim your narrative. You stop being the person they walked away from and start being the person they can't reach anymore. Not because you blocked them, but because you've outgrown the level where they left you. You don't hold grudges, you just hold boundaries. And those boundaries, they speak for you louder than words ever could. Let's talk about the moment they come back, because often they will. Whether it's weeks later, months later, or sometimes even years. People always circle back to what feels stable, especially when their world starts spinning. They remember how safe you felt, how consistent, how deep. But now you're no longer available for shallow energy. You're no longer interested in half love, half effort, half presence. You want full or nothing, not because you're demanding, but because you've done the inner math and you've realized your peace is too expensive to rent out to someone who can't stay. So maybe you respond, maybe you don't. But either way, you don't react. You don't chase. You don't ask what happened, because deep down you already know. And more importantly, you don't need to know. Their why isn't your responsibility. Their absence wasn't your fault. Their silence didn't define your worth. You've moved from story to sovereignty, from confusion to clarity. And that is a shift no one can undo. Let's say this together. I don't need them to regret losing me. I just need to keep living in a way that makes peace impossible to ignore. Because regret is theirs to carry, not yours to collect. You don't need justice. You don't need revenge. You don't need "I'm sorry." You just need to keep building. And what are you building now? A life rooted in peace, relationships built on mutual respect, not desperation, habits that reflect your highest self, a future that isn't shaped by people who couldn't stay present in your past. You are no longer chasing people. You're attracting energy. You're no longer over-explaining. You're embodying value. You're no longer afraid of losing them. You are unwilling to lose yourself. This is your return, not loud, not viral, not public, but deep, centered, magnetic. The kind of return that makes people pause, because they feel your energy before they hear your words, because your stillness says everything, because your absence is now the loudest thing in the room. So let them miss you, let them scroll, let them remember, let them feel the weight of what they couldn't hold. But you keep moving, not to get away, but to go where you're meant to be, because where you're headed, they can't follow. Not because you're cold, but because you're clear. Not because you're distant, but because you're done. You didn't lose them. They lost access to someone who was willing to give everything, but finally learned to give that love inward. Let them miss that. Let them chase the version of you that no longer exists. And let that silence be your softest, strongest answer.